You're listening to the official Reformed Stoic Podcast, covering politics, philosophy, theology, conspiracy theories. I'm ready to get to the bottom of this life. Are you? Join Wolfgang, Sketty Squad, Purity Gang, as we strive to take dominion over this dying planet. I am Reformed Stoic, and this is my podcast. How does it feel to be in the gang? Let's go. Hang Tenny. Nah, Rick's a hard man. Feeling hard. Dino Nuggies. Making Dino Nuggies, dude. I've had some good chicken nugget times, man. You know, it's ups and downs. Lately, it's kind of fish sticks. If I'm going for something cheap and easy in the freezer, I'll hit me up some fish sticks. The good ones, man. We got chicken fingers, Dad. The good ones. Let's go. How we doing, boyos? I'm on my second cup of coffee of the day. Felt weird. Dude, I slept for a long-ass time last night. I fell asleep on the couch at, like, midnight. Let's see. I fell asleep on the couch at, like, 12:30 or something while I was watching stuff. Woke up at 2 a.m., and then I just went to bed. And I still slept until 1 p.m., dude. So if you count the sleeping on the couch, man, I slept for like over 11 hours, bro. I got a lot of sleep last night. I'm in SIG mode, not eating a lot. I had some toast. At least, you know, 2 cups of coffee is probably better than Rockstar. But we got some breaking news for you today. Let me get my headphones rocking. Shrimp. Oh, I gotta get everything adjusted here. Man, Wrinkles is all over the microphone. Watch out, Rinky. Come on. Gotta get everything set up for the gang. Yeah, so for today's show, we're gonna go over Donald Trump getting raided by the FBI. Gonna see what's hoodie with some homelessness in the United States. And then we're gonna watch a couple of different perspectives on salvation by faith alone. Hope everybody's doing good today. We had some all right chilling this weekend. I'm getting those fall vibes, guys. It's hard for me to pick my favorite season. It just feels good when the season's about to change, man. You know, it was kind of like when you were a kid and you're kind of excited for the next school year. New school year coming, fresh adventures, about to hit that holiday streak, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Halloween's all month, baby, Smeartober. Get some horror movies rocking. All of that's around the corner. So without further ado, let's shift to the news segment. Breaking news. You're listening to the Reformed Stoic News segment. Let's go. One big sip to kick it off. The sip heard around the world. All right, let's get situated. Let's get it situated. My Halloween costume choices: Travis Bickle, Travis Bateman, or Terry Silver. Karate Kid 3. Karate Kid 3, huh? Interesting. All right, let's get it cranking with some news.
In battleground states across the country, GOP activists, Republican Party chairs, and even a state Senate president.
I am the Senate president of Arizona, and it is our job to make sure we have fair and accurate elections.
Are getting hit with subpoenas. As early as this week, some Republicans tied to the plan to put forward fake electors for Donald Trump are set to turn over information to federal investigators, sources tell CNN.
If they have something they think is a crime, they'll bring an indictment, and that's when you'll find out what they're doing.
The Justice Department's investigation into January 6th began with the violence that erupted at the U.S. Capitol and charges against more than 800 alleged rioters, including the leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. But in recent months, it's expanded to cover the fake elector scheme in 7 battleground states, with subpoenas to prominent Republicans like Arizona Senate President Karen Fann, Georgia Republican Party Chairman David Schaefer, and Arizona Republican Party Chair Kelly Ward.
Do not let this election be stolen.
The probe also inching closer to Trump as investigators raided Jeffrey Clark's home, the former DOJ official who pushed Donald Trump's voter fraud claims.
They even brought along something, Tucker, I've never seen before or heard of, a electronic sniffing dog. And they took all of the electronics from my house.
And also seized electronics from former Trump election attorney John Eastman, who peddled baseless fraud claims and pushed a legal theory that Vice President Pence could block the 2020 election certification.
All we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock, he let the legislatures of the state look into this.
Beyond the DOJ probe, a separate criminal investigation into Trump and his allies is escalating in Georgia, where investigators subpoenaed key Trump allies, including Rudy Giuliani and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. The district attorney there says more subpoenas may soon be headed to Trump's inner circle.
We're going to do our due diligence.
And a separate congressional investigation unearthing new details, like Trump's eagerness to go to the Capitol January 6th. And the legal risks that went with it.
Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
Going to the Capitol.
Those revelations increasing Trump's criminal exposure and raising the odds he could face repercussions.
Yeah, so CX coin bag holder says all smoke and misdirection. It's a lot to chew on, man. You know, this is hot off the press today. Donald Trump getting raided. Sounds like there's a bunch of streams outside of his Mar-a-Lago home. You know, I wonder sometimes, was Trump some sort of a cowboy? Was he somebody who wasn't meant to be president? But you really look into it, Trump's big money. I more or less think that Trump is a part of the establishment as well. You know, really he has ties with the Clinton family. It really just seems like Hillary versus Trump was like pro wrestling. And Trump's even done pro wrestling before. Not saying that's supposed to mean anything, but the idea that it's a dog and pony show, that these events are just kind of set up. I mean, what I'm seeing is that they're making this January 6th thing out to be huge. Like, this is the biggest thing that's happened in our country. And oh my gosh, so much. There was an insurrection. And Trump's being investigated. And I don't know, man. Sometimes I don't know what to make of all of this. But these days with YouTube, there's this big beacon of possibly misdirection where they can just grab the masses' attention. And, you know, it was that way before with the news. If anything, now with the internet, like on one hand, they have a stronger grip on the masses, but then there's also this fracturing where people are starting to question the mainstream narrative. But the question is, like, was Donald Trump really some sort of a hero taking on the establishment? And that's what Q was all about. A lot of people are saying that Q is like JFK Jr., and then people say that, like, Q is JFK Jr. and he's the Antichrist and he's going to come back. And a lot of this they say. I mean, that's kind of how the internet works. You just snoop around message boards and a lot of hearsay. I mean, as far as we can see, just kind of based off of reality, Trump is being raided for some reason that I don't even really understand. I'm not even really sure why Trump is being raided. But, you know, hopefully We can get an idea of that here. We got 12 minutes. That was CNN before, our favorite. Now we got 12 minutes from News Nation. Let's go.
Real quickly, George, I want to get back to the border in a second, but this is breaking news. Just in the past 2 minutes, a statement by President Trump, 45th president of the United States. These are dark times for our nation as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, is currently under siege, raided and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. Nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before. I know you didn't normally disagree with the president, but FBI agents raiding a former president's home, office, business is unprecedented, right?
I can think of no precedent. However, in order for them to do this, they have had to satisfy some judge that they have probable cause to think that there's important materials pertaining to law enforcement. I have no idea. None of us do at this point. This is, as you say, fast-breaking news. But it is, I think, reasonable to assume that the FBI is not a rogue organization in this case, and that they have a warrant that reflects the satisfaction of a judge, that they know what they're doing.
You know the old line, a good prosecutor, especially a good federal prosecutor, can indict a ham sandwich. So getting search warrants is even a lower bar than that. You said if we believe the FBI effectively to be acting in good faith. There are a lot of Republicans, even relatively sane Republicans and Trump-skeptical Republicans, who after the Clinton email investigation and then the Russian collusion investigation and now Hunter Biden's laptop investigation really have sincere questions about just that fact, whether the FBI is a fair, independent, and actor of good faith sans politics.
Yes, exactly. During the Mueller investigation of the so-called Russian collusion, there were, of course, 2 FBI agents who are not only in a romantic relationship, but their text messages back and forth radiated hostility toward Trump. This is the kind of thing a law enforcement agency simply can't put up with. And the FBI has a very determined and very experienced critic in Senator Grassley, a 7-term senator from Iowa, who is a longtime critic and is, I think, when the unraveling of the Hunter Biden story proceeds, as it will do if the Republicans take charge of either house of Congress, there will be an investigation of this. The FBI stands to have its reputation tarnished.
Yeah, Christopher Wray underwent.
That would be big if true. True if big, if that's true, that agents are getting capped. This could be something that's supposed to spark more civil conflict. You know, I think what I'm seeing here is they're trying to kick it off, guys. The tensions between the right and the left right now, it's been this way for a long time, and yeah, it just seems like all this tension's built up, and something's gonna pop it off, man. And I don't know, dude. Do people really love Trump that much? Like we all gotta go to war for Trump? I don't know, man. I don't know anymore, boyos. Sometimes I just want to eat my dinosaur nuggies and watch comfy movies and Dragon Ball Z and crank it.
Withering questioning by the Judiciary Committee that you mentioned just a couple of days ago. Have you gotten any sense as you've watched this play out that there is an understanding within either the FBI or the Justice Department, because you'd have to think that Merrick Garland, the AG, would have signed off on this before you go raid a former president's home? Any understanding of the burden of proof that will be required to overcome the real feelings by people on the right that there is a good faith issue?
I can't answer that. This I can say, however. 74 million people voted for Mr. Trump. No matter what you think of Mr. Trump, there's a large number of Americans who look at this and say, that was our choice for president, and he's not being treated very well, which is why there had better be an explanation forthcoming really soon and with considerable detail as to what they're doing down there. It just begins to look at some point. Remember when the Hunter Biden laptop broke, a whole bunch, I think like 50 former national security officials in the federal government rallied around the proposition that this was Russian disinformation. And it began to look to a lot of people, again, people not particularly sympathetic to Mr. Trump, that the Washington establishment, what's called the administrative or deep state, was rallying round one of their own to protect Mr. Biden. So we're going to need a lot of information.
All right.
Obviously
Let's go ahead and check in on the live. Here we go. We're live. We're live at the scene.
This utility easement. You guys need to leave.
Right over here.
Thank you.
No,
this is not the grass area.
Not the grass area. This is public.
Thank you so much, guys. Really do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Looks like everybody's getting kicked out. All right. Well, it looks like they're getting kicked out. Let's keep rolling with this.
Quickly.
Right. And I'm thinking just the way this plays out. You and I have been in Washington for a while. You were obviously there for a lot longer. That the FBI had to know this was going to leak almost immediately. You can't show up with FBI jackets at Mar-a-Lago and it's not going to leak. That you would have had a rollout on this almost ready to go the second the FBI agent showed up. You hit send on a press release that explains all these things. According at least to what we're seeing, the FBI has just left Mar-a-Lago, so it's happened for a while. And yet we're not seeing any explanation from the DOJ so far. There's no even email sent out ahead of time. Hey, stand by for a DOJ press conference at 7:30 or 8 p.m. with the Attorney General to speak on a matter of importance. Nothing.
There will be. I mean, one thing they've accomplished already is they have sent an electric current through the journalism industry, and it's a big one in the city of Washington. So people are, as we speak, Leland, they are swarming all over this city, not least over the Justice Department building on Constitution Avenue, looking for answers to a question that the government itself has now posed.
I guess, are we to believe that there will be enough skepticism by the journalist establishment in D.C. of this raid itself? And I ask that because there was an enormous amount of acceptance of the Hunter Biden Russian disinformation theme by that very same establishment.
I think the very fact that there has been questions raised about the Hunter Biden laptop and the fact that there is a long history of federal law enforcement being swept up in political passions. The Palmer raids from Attorney General Palmer right after the First World War through the often politicized behavior of the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover when he became too big to fire. There is a long history of suspicion about the neutrality and good administration of the FBI, and this will only quicken those doubts and suspicions.
From here, how long does the Attorney General, because that's really who the FBI works for, have to make some kind of real statement?
Well, poor Merrick Garland was a circuit judge, an appellate judge on the D.C. circuit, and this is deep political waters here, fast.
Let's pause and read some comments. For this to happen, there needs to be a FISA warrant, as Trump was a president of the U.S., and we know how that went last time for the FBI. Any Democratic judge would agree with that. Oh, would agree with what? Making America great again. Just a reminder, the FBI manufactured the Whitmer kidnapping plot. Suspects acquitted. Satisfy some judge because FBI would never lie to a judge. How serious is this if there aren't coordinated raids happening at all of his properties? That we know so far. Reasonable to assume it is reasonable to assume the FBI is not acting. Good faith after the last 6 years. Sounds like people are losing faith in the FBI. How could that be? This has never happened in the entirety of American history. Wow. Law enforcement has never gone after an ex-president. This sets a very bad precedent going forward. If there's no smoking gun that results from this and it's just more political theater, this will end badly. Well, I think it will end badly because of the people. Something just tells me that Trump is just, it's a dog and pony show, man. Right, left. When people talk about, the evil Democrats are taking over, the evil Republicans are taking over, I think the system is taking over. The system's playing us, man. They're playing us, brah. They run both sides. The money rules, big money, big corporate rules, and conflict in the streets will just result in militarized police, and people have been talking about that for a long time. Military establishment, martial law. I don't know, boys. I'm seeing some clouds forming around this country right now.
Running in turbulent political waters that he is not used to dealing with. No one quite is. That's why you so often have explicitly political people, John Mitchell, Robert Kennedy in the Attorney General's office. I think he will feel considerable pressure, and I don't know, no one knows whether he has sound, savvy, experienced political advisors around him. Politics is a skill. Politics is a learned business, and his learning curve is going to be very steep.
Yeah, this is not even the big leagues. This is the World Series. Once you raid a former president's private residence with the FBI,
correct,
everything becomes political as we think about President Trump, who's sort of trying to revive his image, revive the MAGA coalition. Certainly doesn't seem to have control over it in the way that he used to. We were talking earlier today about this, that President Trump built his coalition on being the billionaire who could channel the anger of the common man. That was 2016. Now he is the billionaire who wants the common man to care about his grievances, a la the 2020
2 weeks, baby.
election and the big steal, on and on and on. Forget what you think of either of those two things. Does this raid have the potential to somehow galvanize people who may not like Donald Trump, but they like even less the politicalization of the FBI?
What we now may have, breaking as we speak, Leland, is a fresh grievance. Mr. Trump's primary grievance is now 2 years old. It goes back to 2020. If this is not explained,
fresh grievance,
promptly, fully, adequately, he is going to go to his people and say, yes, I've got grievances. Now I got a new one. And there are millions and millions of people who are prepared to be receptive to this. This is fire that is being played with.
Yeah, I actually almost can't believe it in terms of what we're seeing, of the magnitude of it, in the way that it breaks with a statement from President Trump talking about this. And you can see that no one sees it coming, because as I look through the rest of sort of political Twitter and even inner Washington establishment discussions, it didn't leak beforehand, which seems in and of itself a pretty extraordinary moment. Is there any way that this ends up, I'll ask it in a different way. How does this end up that it is not galvanizing and uniting for Republicans?
It could be divisive for Republicans, because some Republicans are probably looking for a reason to put distance between themselves and Mr. Trump, and there are other Republicans who have decided that Mr. Trump is their lifeline, and they're going to stick with him. What really alarms me is the sense that Americans have an increasing feeling that the political class is behaving strangely, and that the political class includes not just people elected in office, but politics as a class interest in the entire executive branch apparatus, which is why sometime within the next 24 hours, tomorrow night at this time, we'd better have a whole lot of answers to. Otherwise, we're going to have a rumor mill, and we're going to have people preemptively making judgments about this that it just feeds the fires in a nation that's already simmering with suspicions.
Yeah, and obviously suspicions, the rumors, the innuendo, and the divisiveness only breeds more when there's less hard facts and there's more time for you and I to fill on cable news. George, it's great to see you. Thank you for playing along through this. We've sort of both responded to this in real time. Thank you. We'll talk soon. Good to see you, sir. As we look at Mar-a-Lago, important to note, the president is not there. He's actually up at his golf course in Bedminster. That's normally where he spends the summers. Mar-a-Lago, though, is where his presidential office is, his post-presidential office that is paid for by taxpayers. It's obviously where he went when he left the White House in 2021. Thanks for watching. Go to News Nation now.
You know, my whole thing, guys, is you just think, how long ago really were the 50s, post-World War II America? I talk about that a lot. I see that as, like, the era that we're in. I've heard people online talk about how, like, every new age needs it needs like a foundation story. It needs like some sort of a history that it's based off of. And ours is based off of World War II and the Holocaust a lot of the time. It just hasn't been that long, you guys. And how did things change over the course of 1950s until now? We've seen this rapidly shifting culture. As a musician, I definitely see it in the music, you know, from the solid gold oldies, the Beatles take over, then we get the hippie, freaking glow-up bands, you know, funk, disco, hair metal. The culture has just been rapidly shifting decade by decade. And, you know, now we got Zoomer rap and social media, and technology was really starting to boom in the 2000s. Things have just shifted so rapidly. And ultimately, the summary at this point, I think, is division between the people. It's to this point where we just about got, you know, the supposed silent majority of conservatives, and then you got the really loud, outspoken far left. It just seems like dividing lines have been drawn. And, you know, maybe that was the grand scheme. Maybe the grand scheme was to just cut the population in half and set us against each other. And what it all comes down to is, you know, the establishment, the money, the corporations, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Rothschild, they remain unscathed. Middle-class Antifa beating up the middle-class Proud Boys in the streets. According to the left, you know, white privilege and the rich and they say they're going to stick it to the billionaires, but it's really the majority of their focus goes against like lower upper class families, you know, maybe people who make hundreds of $1,000s a year. Hate, my friends. They want us to hate each other. They want war. They want chaos. Love could change the world, man. Just love each other, bro.
Caitlin, obviously a very significant headline that you are breaking. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, this is incredibly significant. And of course, we should note that when the former president confirmed that, yes, this raid did happen on his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, he did not specify why exactly this raid happened. So we are still trying to confirm that. Of course, I know you mentioned the missing documents from the National Archives and the concerns about that. So that remains to be seen. I will note that in this statement where the former president confirmed to me that, yes, FBI agents did conduct a raid at Mar-a-Lago today, he said it was a large group of FBI agents. He says that he believes this is a politically motivated event that happened, this search of Mar-a-Lago. Of course, we're waiting to hear from authorities why they conducted this search, how they got this search warrant, and of course, what the reason is behind it. I will note, he does give one detail in here that is notable. He says, quote, Aaron, I'm going to read this now. Such an assault could only take place in broken third world countries. Sadly, America has now become one of those countries. He says, quote, "They even broke into my safe." Now, Aaron, he does not say what they were looking for, what they wanted to get, if they took anything from that safe, but it is notable that he says they did even break into his safe. In this statement, I should note, when he does not say what the reason is for this raid, he does reference Hillary Clinton's emails. Of course, that has long been an obsession of the former president's. He said nothing happened to her to hold her accountable, talking about what she took from the White House. So that could be an indication that this is related to the National Archives. But again, we are still waiting to find out more, though Trump has confirmed to me that, yes, this raid was conducted on Mar-a-Lago today.
Whoo, boy. Feel like something's a brewing, lads. Storm's coming. So here we got NBC. Miami. Former President Donald Trump said in a statement Monday that his home in Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida was raided by a large group of FBI agents. Trump also claimed the presence of law enforcement was unannounced and the reason was politically motivated, though he did not provide specifics. These are dark times for our nation, as my beautiful home. These are dark times for our nation, as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, is currently under siege, raided, and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. That was my best Donald Trump. Trump said in a lengthy email statement issued by his Save America political committee, "After working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate," Trump said before bemoaning they even broke into my safe. A person familiar with the matter said the FBI is not disrupting that and carried out the search. At Justice Department headquarters, a spokesperson declined to comment to NBC News. An official at the FBI Washington field office declined to comment, and officials at the FBI field office in Miami did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The White House said it was not given a heads up. "We did not have notice of the reported action and would refer you to the Justice Department for any additional information," a White House official said. The FBI raid came days after Attorney General Merrick Garland told NBC News that the most wide-ranging investigation in Justice Department history was examining not only the rioters who invaded the Capitol and physically attacked officers, but was also examining whether anyone was criminally responsible for interfering with the peaceful transfer of power from one administration to another. In February, the National Archives and Records Administration asked the Justice Department to examine whether Trump's handling of White House records violated federal law, a story first reported by the Washington Post and subsequently confirmed by NBC sources. The status of that request is unclear. In mid-January, the National Archives arranged for the transport from Mar-a-Lago to the National Archives of 15 boxes that contained presidential records following discussions with President Trump's representatives in 2021, the agency said in a statement. Trump's involvement in the January 6 riot, which resulted in his second impeachment, is also the subject of a House committee examining the insurrection. Of how the law enforcement action might affect Trump's political aspirations, a person close to Trump said, "If he wasn't running before, he is now." The source, who is not authorized to speak publicly, appeared to be suggesting that Trump might benefit from being an active candidate for the presidency if he faces legal jeopardy. Trump is not at Mar-a-Lago, his winter residence. He often spends his summers at Trump National Golf Club, Bedminster in New Jersey. All right, guys. Well, I covered this because it's happening right now, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. It sounds like people are already doing their little protests and showing up, and I don't know, man. I really wonder, guys. I feel like the population just might be so sedated and adjusted to comfort that, you know, everybody's waiting for everybody else to start something. Nobody wants to start anything. I'm not saying I want to start anything. I just feel like we're gridlocked, you guys. I feel like we're gridlocked. We're getting played by this system. And the kind of conflict they're trying to encourage is between Democrat voters and Republican voters. Alrighty then, guys. Let's go ahead and move to the next topic. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about this Trump raid for the rest of the week. So, let's talk about homelessness in the United States. First, we got KGW News. This is from not that long ago, July 15th. Families in Southeast Portland say growing homeless camps have them afraid to leave the house.
And I'm living in a nightmare neighborhood.
It's really scary.
For years, these neighbors have been watching the city's homeless crisis spread across parts of Southeast Portland. Now it's right outside their front door.
I want to cry. I just want my house back.
Christina Hartnett lives on 80th and Powell, where a majority of the campers stay.
My lawn is now becoming a public bathroom.
She fears leaving her house just to go to work.
And it is scary when you have grown men meth raging in your driveway. The last thing I feel safe doing is going out and saying, hey, can you please move so I can go to work?
Calling the police in city is an everyday chore with little reward.
So far, no one has come to help us.
Central City Concern Clean Start crews assessed this site Thursday. It was one of about 1,900 other campsites reported just this week. In the past 10 days, they found 272 encampments that pose a greater health and safety risk, which is why they haven't removed the camps in this neighborhood. But just getting the city to come out and assess it has been a full-time job.
I have to report from like four different bureaus, then I have to report that report to a report, and then I have to report that report to a second report, and it's the only way to get any kind of traction.
I feel like nobody hears us. Nobody cares about us.
This mother didn't want to be identified on camera, afraid of retaliation from those living on the streets. She rarely lets her children outside to play.
It's very sad, because they're just kids, so they want to play.
I don't know where they're coming from.
Tess has lived in this neighborhood for 35 years. These boards now cover her front door windows after they were smashed by those living on the streets. She also installed security cameras around her house.
Scared. Most of all scared because I don't know what they're going to go next.
It's also affecting a nearby restaurant.
I've come into the bathroom and found people standing there in their underwear scrubbing up in the sink in a sports bar in the bathroom. It unnerves our customers when
That guy looks like he can cook a mean burger. I'm down to check out that restaurant.
they pull in and they see people overdosing on the sidewalks out in front of our restaurant.
I sleep right here in the back seat.
Jennifer Suprick is 43 years old.
I'm an addict, and my family doesn't condone it.
She lives in this broken down van on the Southeast Powell Boulevard frontage road.
So I just lay the seats down and we can climb in the back.
It's one of the areas neighbors are afraid to go.
I mean, we can coexist. It's just a matter of some homeless people they're resentful towards the neighborhood because of the way they treat them.
I think that it's not always what it seems. We aren't always what we seem.
Brendan Harvey has spent most of his life in and out of homelessness.
So usually it has something to do with relapse, and after a relapse, my housing usually falls out from under me, and then I usually have nowhere to turn.
He understands why neighbors are frustrated.
So I feel like they have a right to be upset.
He's seen firsthand the increase in violence from some of the campers.
I feel like it's just gotten more bold, more rash. People aren't as afraid to do things that are, have to do with criminality.
It is going to take one of us getting severely hurt or killed before they will do anything to come help us.
Meanwhile,
please come help me.
Does our city do something about it? Are they doing something about these people that need some help?
This never-ending cry for help continues.
It's just been going on so long now that we're all over it. They're over it, we're over it, everybody's over it.
Now, the city only has the resources to remove about 50 encampments a week, and they say that they assess each report about 48 hours after.
Hold on, do you see that girl on the scooter? We gotta do the classic,
move about
right?
50.
For it.
Now, this.
Let's go!
And they receive hundreds of reports for high-risk camps every day. Ashley?
Yeah, Blair, you feel for everybody there. Thank you.
Oh, man. You guys, I feel like there's just this there's this default chaos in the absence of structure of society. And when I think of a structured society, I think of monarchs. I think of like Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur. I think of kings, and I think of a force applied by men and overseen by God. I heavily suspect that this is a punishment for rejecting God. It just seems like the chaos in this tamed, civilized society is just starting to overflow, and the system is just too divided. It's too much about give me what I want, no, give me what I want. We're worried about people's feelings, worried about winning. People got to eat, bro. People got to eat. Families got to form. People got to have kids. They just used to have it set up, so, you know, there were always homeless people, but people were generally getting married. People were generally having families, generally getting jobs. And we're just seeing this new era of men not participating in society, not working, drug epidemics, fentanyl killing people, homeless tent communities overflowing in cities. There's got to be a drastic change, man. And it's like, well, what's your solution? And what do you think the solution is? And it's hard to say. When you have a country where half the people hate the other half, I just don't think it bides well for a functioning society. I think people need to care about each other and look out for each other. And, you know, explaining like why people don't care for each other. Well, they say that diversity is our strength, but there is an inherent preference for your own kind. And we're certainly seeing that in the left, you know, like all kinds of black pride, that's encouraged. I understand how white nationalism can be problematic, but we have this still the majority, ultimately white people, and though a lot of them have been sucked into radical far leftism, there's just people who realize like this isn't really my country anymore. These aren't really my people anymore, and it goes far beyond race. We just don't get along anymore. Now, as far as how this ties into homelessness, I just think when a strong system begins to fall apart, these are the kind of things you see arise in: homelessness, drug addiction, chaos. There's a rising wave of chaos that I fear is coming to the surface. You keep on voting for the same people, and then you're surprised when nothing is done. You need to vote everyone out, start over, and if the next group is not doing anything, you get rid of them too. You keep on going until you get the right people in the right job to handle things like this. The people in charge need to have their addresses posted. Yikes! I didn't say that. I just read a comment. I really feel for the elderly. When we get older and older, it's a challenge to fight anything. Poor lady is so scared. Oh, here we go. One day ago. Oregon as a whole is becoming a cesspool. I live in Lincoln County, and my truck has been broken into and later stolen and retrieved by police. My dad's business partner had his truck stolen in Portland. It was found absolutely destroyed, full of needles and garbage. I grew up in a family that used to give money and food to homeless with their signs. I now have no sympathy. No one in our government cares at all. And I'm tired of being told to be tolerant towards people like this. People who chose not to do drugs are being punished because of this. One of the most liberal cities in the country is in shambles. I'm sure there is no correlation at all. You don't really see homeless people in Japan. Well, I'll tell you what, Japan's got problems too. The hikikomori stuff originated over there. They just have this work-driven society where hypergamy seems to be at play as well. And I just think there's this chaotic force, this directionlessness, this failure that's just being pumped into these modern generations. And it's hard to put my finger on it, guys. We just seem to be heading to a time where the system is just failing. And I don't even know if there's anything that can be done about it. When this happens in history, there's usually a shift of power, war, global conflict. I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I just feel this force, you guys. Like, we had what seemed to be good times for a while, and it's easy to look at, you know, your childhood and those years with rosy-colored glasses or rose-tinted lenses or whatever. There was always a political struggle in this country, but it just seems like, I feel like the internet is what pushed it into overdrive, everybody being connected. I just don't know if this can be tamed. I don't know what the solution is. Here we go. Now we got PBS NewsHour.
Attention. The number of Americans. Homelessness is not a new issue, but it is one that often doesn't receive a lot of attention. The number of Americans living without homes, in shelters, or on the streets continues to rise at an alarming rate. Judy Woodruff has this report on why that is and what more can be done to prevent it.
Homelessness often gets extra attention during the holiday season, of course, but the problem has grown year-round, particularly in many cities. Estimates show that as many as 500,000 people are homeless in the U.S. on any given night. Nan Roman is the CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and she joins me now. Nan Roman, thank you for joining us. In full disclosure, I serve on the board of the Alliance. But first, let me ask you, how serious is the homelessness problem in this country compared to a few years ago?
Well, the problem of homelessness has been getting worse in this country compared to a few years ago. From 2007 to 2016, it had been going down pretty steadily every year. But starting in 2016, it's been creeping up every year, including this year, as far as we know.
And do you understand why that is?
I think it's largely due to the lack of affordable housing and housing getting more expensive, and also what people earn purchasing less housing.
And is that due to federal policy, state policy? What would you ascribe it to?
It's due to the market to some degree. I mean, we really don't have an adequate supply of housing in the U.S. anymore. We're about 5 million units short of having an adequate supply of housing overall. And in the affordable housing category, it's even worse. We're about 7 million units short of enough affordable housing for all of the low-income households that need it. And that really is the driver around homelessness.
And do you have a sense, we were just talking about this, of how COVID has affected people's ability to be in a home?
You know, it's sort of a mixed bag. I think on the one hand, a lot of the benefits that have been coming to people in terms of the child tax credit, the income tax credits, the boost in unemployment insurance and so forth have given people resources, and the eviction moratorium, I should also mention, have given people resources or protected them so that they didn't become homeless. Our data isn't so good because some of the counts for the past 2 years have been stopped because of COVID. But we also see in some populations that it looks like there's an increase. There appears to be an increase in unsheltered homelessness, for example, whereas family homelessness is down, we think.
And I saw that, I believe you were saying that more than a third of those who are homeless are completely unsheltered. They don't have any place, or don't go anywhere, don't have a place to go.
That's right. So the homelessness system is basically just not large enough for the problem to help people who are homeless. And 39% of people who are homeless don't even have a shelter bed. So they're living on the streets and encampments, vehicles, places not meant for human habitation.
Nan Roman, you were also telling me that there was a good amount of money that was allocated to address housing the homeless in the legislation that was passed because of COVID, the American Rescue Plan, the CARES Act, and you were saying not all that money has been spent. Why not? Can you give us a sense of what's happening there?
I think there are a couple reasons. There was about $14 billion between the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, specifically targeted to people who are homeless. Some of the issues around it being slow have to do with just the ability of the sector to absorb it, staffs being low, the hiring, the same sorts of things you hear about businesses. That's also happening in government and nonprofit sectors. And so many resources flowing into communities have made it a little bit difficult for them to get the money out.
Is that an argument that more federal money right now, that many of these communities are just not equipped to handle it?
I think the once in a lifetime injection of funds into solving this problem. We estimate that the resources in Build Back Better, should that prevail, could house 80,000 households. So that's quite a big dent.
I want to come back finally to why so many people are homeless in this country. I know I hear many people saying, well, they think they'll say it's because of mental illness, or they think it's because of substance abuse. But as you suggested earlier, it is more complicated than that.
It really is about affordable housing and wages. I will age myself, but I'll say when I first started working in the late 70s, there really was, on housing issues, there was not homelessness. Very, very few people were homeless. And what's changed since then is that then there was an adequate supply of affordable housing, and now we're 7 million units short. And that's the driver. If housing is affordable, people will be housed. They won't be living on the street. It's really housing's not affordable, that they're homeless.
And so at this holiday season, what would you want Americans to know about homelessness in this country?
Well, I'd want them not to blame homeless people for their homelessness, to understand that the solution is really not that complicated, and to have compassion for people. It seems to me that in a country as wealthy as ours and as wonderful as ours, we really should not have hundreds of thousands of people living on the street.
Nan Roman, who is the CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, there's an overwhelming sentiment that, these people speaking on the problem, it's their fault, and comments are turned off. I'm sure a lot of the same sentiment was in that comment section. What do we do now is the question. You point fingers, you say why it got this way. I've been familiar with this kind of talk for years at this point, and it's just like, but what do we do to fix the country? I just imagine some sort of a program that sweeps all the homeless up off the street, basically by force, gets them in detoxification withdrawal centers where they're basically just I mean, it's like some sort of a camp. It's like some sort of an internment camp for homeless where we don't want to gas them or anything. You just want them to detox. Like, they don't have a choice. Like, you're in there for a week and screaming, and it wouldn't be pretty. A lot of people getting off drugs, put into some sort of not like a prison, but like a new kind of a prison-esque, internment camp-esque establishment where it's like, you're homeless, we're taking you off the street, we're getting you clean, you're doing some labor for the state. It's like a different kind of a prison, and I imagine they wouldn't be like the most wonderful facilities ever, but you get these people rehabilitated, you get them off drugs, you put a little bit of money in their pocket. And then I think is a similar, different, but similar kind of a program for just all these men who have left society. Like, you need some sort of a clear-cut entry, a way for men with employment gaps in their resume to get jobs. Like a job that's just accessible to people who have left the workforce, who haven't been doing anything. A clear entry point back into society for homeless people, for men who have opted out. Just like, hey, you can get this job. It's whatever. It's like a little bit above minimum wage. It's just something that's doable, a job that you can get. Re-entry points into society. This current system, it's just got people leaking. It's just a leak. People are ending up on the streets, ending up on drugs, ending up in their parents' basement. A lot of people out there who are just not in it anymore. Give them farmland and meth and whatever they want, but they have to work and produce. Let's go. We need a massive recession to lower all prices, get rid of minimum wages. Answer is simply capitalism. The more one person is winning, the more another person is losing. Do you ever listen to your 1 hour positivity synth pop mixtape? Not really. I'm trying to make some new music out here, man. That last rap song you guys heard, I'm trying to keep some more bangers coming. I just feel like the days are moving by so fast. It's like the day goes by quick and I haven't made a song or read or done anything. Do away with minimum wage, let people work for $3 an hour, then they can afford a home. Yeah. They could just lie on their resume. I have told many jobs I'm a lot more qualified than I am. Yeah, I hear people saying that. I just feel like it shouldn't be that way. But I guess that's another topic. Capitalism, baby. All right, we got one more new segment here. California is officially the poorest state in America, and this was in July.
Ever since the gold rush started in 1848, California has been the land of dreams. Whether you were an immigrant looking for a better life or an aspiring entrepreneur that wanted to hit it big, your best shot was in California. Over time, this led to California housing some of the biggest companies in the world, from Wells Fargo and Disney to Apple and Google. And consequently, we also saw the wealthiest people in the world reside in fancy mansions across California. Eventually, California's economy became so large that it started dwarfing countries. Right now, California's GDP stands at $3.356 trillion. This makes California the 5th largest economy in the world. But despite this title, it hasn't been nearly that great for most Californian citizens for quite some time. In fact, most Californians are struggling to make ends meet due to the rapidly growing wealth inequality in the state. Things have gotten so bad that California actually became the state with the highest poverty level in the US. This isn't to say that Californians aren't making money per se, but rather that the cost of living in the state is so high that even decent income earners fall below the poverty line. According to the US Census Bureau, a whopping 15.4% of Californians are living in poverty. And I'm sure there's loads of people that are just above the poverty line that don't have it much better. So what happened to the Golden State?
Oh, nothing and be happy.
With sky-high inflation and rapidly rising prices across the country, we've started to hear this phrase more and more. You will own nothing and be happy. While this may sound a bit cynical and pessimistic, this is exactly what's been happening in California for decades. Californians have slowly been priced out of one thing after another, which has forced them to rent or give up the said item. Likely the best example of this is housing. Much of the US has seen a significant rise in housing prices ever since the pandemic started. This has led many to hope for a housing market crash so that they can finally buy for a reasonable price. But even if there was a housing crash, it wouldn't be much easier for Californians to buy a house. Here's the thing, the median sale price across the entire state is a whopping $843,000. Even if the housing market were to crash 30%, the median sale price would stand at $600,000, which is still higher than the median sale price before the pandemic started. The median household income in California currently stands at $78,000. This means that the average house costs over 10 times the average family's annual income. And even with the 30% crash, the average house would cost about 7.5 times the average income. This has made home ownership completely unattainable for the average Californian family. And if you're a single person, you probably wouldn't even consider a house. To make things worse, it's not like things are much better for renters. For families, renting a 3-bedroom house will on average cost them $3,000 per month or $36,000 per year. That's literally higher than the median personal income in the US in 2020. And it's not just housing that's crazy expensive either. Basically, every facet of daily life is significantly more expensive. Take gym memberships for example. The national average for a gym membership is $58. Meanwhile, the average gym membership in LA is $70. Similarly, in California, the average haircut for a woman is $69, and the average haircut for a man is $45. The national average is $44 for women and $28 for men. These insane Californian prices carry over to clothing as well. The average pair of jeans costs $60 in California, while the national average is nearly half of that at $34. And I don't even think we need to discuss gas prices, which currently stands at over $6 per gallon. Aside from getting screwed over from a cost of living perspective, many Californians also get screwed over from a tax perspective as well. It's no secret that California has some hefty state income taxes which range from 1% to 12.3%. By the time the average Californian pays their taxes and daily living expenses, they're left with virtually no money. This is why living paycheck to paycheck is extremely common in California. In fact, the only state in which it's even more common is Hawaii. Considering this, it's basically impossible for the average Californian to build any sort of wealth. So it's quite ironic that most people are only now complaining that they are forced to own nothing and to be happy. Californians have already been experiencing this for decades. Aside from barely making ends meet right now, California is also poised to run into an opportunity crisis within the coming decades. Here's the thing, droves of wealthy companies and individuals are ditching California. Tesla and Oracle, for example, have outright moved their headquarters from California to Texas. Meanwhile, other companies haven't quite moved their headquarters, but they're investing significant amounts of money outside California. Apple, for instance, recently built a $1 billion campus in Austin. Historically, this was something that companies were extremely reluctant to do because California simply had the best talent and the most motivated people in the country. But this is no longer true. For starters, the rest of the country has caught up significantly thanks to the opportunities created by technology. And secondly, many of the talented engineers and white-collar workers in California have been fleeing the state themselves. So companies are no longer limited to recruiting primarily from California. Aside from being able to recruit more diverse talent, companies are also able to significantly reduce their payroll by moving to lower-cost states. You see, given the insane living expenses in California, companies also have to pay insane salaries to hire the best talent. At Facebook, for example, software engineers earn a minimum of $184,000 and up to $1.61 million. This is the same case with Google and every other mega-cap company as well. By moving to states like Idaho and Texas, however, these same companies can get away with paying 20-30% less for the same jobs. At first glance, it might sound like these companies are taking advantage of tech workers from these states by paying them less, but this isn't the case either. You see, these discounted salaries stretch further in these low-cost states than the full salaries do in California, so it's a win-win scenario. Employees earn relatively more while companies pay less. On top of this, many of these states are offering companies loads of incentives to move there. For example, Texas offered Tesla up to an 80% property tax rebate for 10 years if they move to Texas. So it makes more sense than ever for these companies to leave California. And as more of them make the choice to move, we're slowly going to see opportunity leaving the state, which will just make it even harder for Californians. On top of high living expenses and fleeing wealth, something else that has been heavily weighing down on California is the ease of being homeless. Now, I'm not trying to say that being homeless is easy because it's obviously not. But with that being said, California has the least severe consequences for being homeless. They have loads of generous homeless programs, and they even hand out money to homeless people. This man in San Francisco, for example, is earning $620 per month by just living on the streets. Of course, this is not enough money to live a royal life, but it's also more than enough money to buy food and basic necessities. Now, many people would describe this as a benefit, and it somewhat is. While many Californians aren't exactly swimming in wealth, they never have to worry about starving either. Worst case scenario, they can live on the streets on checks from the government. But at the same time, this is also kind of negative as well. If you're able to carry on daily life by doing nothing, a good amount of people will choose to do nothing. For example, take a listen to what this homeless man thinks.
I mean, if we're gonna be realistic, they pay you to be homeless here.
When you said that San Francisco pays people to be homeless, what did you mean by that? You mean that literally?
Yeah, I mean, I get $620 a month, dude.
From general assistance,
yeah.
Or would you get? How was that hard to get?
Phone call, bro. Phone call. 200 food stamps and $620 cash a month.
Wow.
Forget about it. Why wouldn't I do it?
And he's not the only one who thinks like this. California's homeless programs are so generous that homeless people from other states immigrate to California to be homeless there instead. Somehow, California has transitioned from being the dream destination for entrepreneurs to being the dream destination for the homeless. Not only does this drain the resources of California, but it also makes everyday life for Californians way harder. Due to the large number of homeless people, it's common to find human feces and drug needles across their cities. In fact, this issue has become so prevalent that San Francisco pays people $184,000 per year to clean their sidewalks. When you have to do this, you clearly have a problem. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to go to work or have my kids go to school in such an area. Leaving the state is often the top priority for anyone with any sort of financial stability. And as these middle class, upper middle class, and high income families leave the state is simply driven further into the depths of poverty. Given the circumstances in California, I don't think you'd be surprised to hear that the population is on the decline, but it's not as drastic as you might think. And this brings up the question, why do people choose to stay in California despite all these drawbacks? Well, there's a few reasons for this, starting with wealth bubbles. Most of the celebrities and billionaires who live in California live in an extremely niche portion of the state that is filled with other wealthy individuals. So they're essentially able to avoid all of the poverty and despair that average Californians face on a daily basis. But what about the average Californian? Why do they choose to stay? Well, usually, the top answer is some sort of emotional connection to the state. Maybe they were born and raised in California and their entire family lives there. Or maybe the person is heavily involved with outdoor activities, and good weather along with beautiful nature are top priorities. Aside from some sort of emotional connection with the state, many people choose to stay in California or even move to California in order to minimize discrimination. California is by far the most accepting place in the entire world, whether we're talking about people of color or LGBT. So people that are part of these communities are reluctant to leave for obvious reasons. It should also be mentioned that California is a sanctuary state, which means that they have some of the loosest rules when it comes to illegal immigrants. In fact, California is home to over 2 million unauthorized immigrants, and I don't think these guys have any plans of moving out anytime soon. Also, something else to note is that there's loads of Californians who do want to leave, but their circumstances prevent it. For example, they might have a unique job that's only available in California. Or maybe they don't have enough money to take the risk of completely uprooting their lives and moving to another state. But even with all these driving factors, California's population is still declining. So clearly, the motivation to leave is quite strong for many. At the end of the day, California is by no means perfect. They have an extremely high cost of living, high taxes, a massive homeless problem, and companies are fleeing as fast as possible. All of these factors have led to California becoming the poorest state in America. And from an objective perspective, it makes little sense to stay. But for many, this is not the only consideration. For them, California is their home, and though it may not be perfect, they would rather stick with California and try to fix the state than flee and watch the state rot from afar. Would you guys stay in California? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you hope that California can make a recovery for the sake of its people. And of course, consider checking out our Discord community to suggest future video ideas, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, I've been hearing negative things about California for a long time, man. What happened to, like, the MTV California? California! Orange County, and all those, like, teen shows in California. It's just not what it used to be, baby. Nothing is. My wife and I are Chinese Americans. Both have doctoral degrees in healthcare. Wrinkles. Wrinkles, stop. We thought about moving to California for the larger Asian community in shorter flights to visit relatives in China. But I did the math. The pay literally have to double to $800K a year for us to move from Texas to California to maintain our current lifestyle. But the pay is only about 30% higher there. So we would drop from upper middle class to middle class living. So we didn't just say no, but hell no. I work as an engineer in a tech company in Germany, and I was offered the opportunity to transfer to their branch in California at twice my current salary. At first, I was excited at the opportunity, but after a talk with a colleague of mine that transferred from there, who gave me a breakdown of the cost of living there, I had a change of heart. After rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, gas, etc., I would be left with less money than I am left with here in Munich after the same expenses, even with the near 50% tax rate here. Glad I dodged that bullet. Yeah, there's a lot of high-paying jobs in California, but the price of living is just insane. You go to like, what is it? San Francisco. Yeah, a lot of tech jobs in San Francisco, but that has like the highest cost of living maybe anywhere. Well, unfortunately, I don't know if any place is going to be sinking into the ocean. That's some global warming cope. All right, let's go ahead and get through this article. Understanding America's Homelessness Crisis. This is from The Week, May 1st, 2022. Major cities are cracking down on homeless encampments. But why are so many people living rough? Here's everything you need to know. How many are homeless? It's hard to determine with any certainty, but in January 2020, more than 580,000 people were homeless in the U.S. on a given night, with an estimated 226,000 of them sleeping outside, in cars, or in abandoned buildings. The 2021 numbers indicated an 8% decrease in homelessness, although that may be misleading. The pandemic delayed or suspended counts in half of the 400 communities that report data to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. During the height of the pandemic, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advised against breaking up homeless encampments out of fear that dispersing people would spread COVID. And cities such as Dallas, Seattle, and Portland, Oregon, saw double-digit growth in tent cities. In New York City, from 23,000 to 5,000 people are living on the streets, with 45,000 in shelters. In San Francisco, nearly 1% of the city's population of 875,000 are homeless. Mayor London Breed declared a state of emergency in the Tenderloin district last December, after it became littered with human excrement and used syringes. Too many people are sprawled out all over our streets, Breed said, adding that homelessness has destroyed our city. Why do people become homeless? The reasons vary, but a few common factors stand out. One is mental illness. The deinstitutionalization and defunding of psychiatric care preceded a spike in homelessness in the 1980s. By 2015, 1/4 of all homeless people were suffering from a serious mental disorder such as schizophrenia. Drug and alcohol use is also often a factor. More than 1/3 of homeless shelter residents struggle with substance abuse disorders. But researchers say that the role of economic factors, particularly the cost and availability of housing, should not be underestimated. Many cities have seen housing costs skyrocket, and a 2018 Zillow study found that homelessness rises wherever people have to devote more than 32% of their income to rent. Poverty can trigger a downward spiral of domestic violence, arrests, jailing, and eviction, which in turn lead to drug use and psychological distress. You experience what they experience, said Pastor Wayne Walker, who runs a Dallas homeless mission, and you are going to have mental health problems too. What effect did COVID have? As closed businesses pushed the unemployment rate close to 15% in April 2020, federal and local governments mobilized to prevent an exponential surge of homelessness. Trillions in relief spending helped fund an 11-month eviction moratorium and let hard-hit cities and states house the homeless in newly vacant motels. COVID's disruptions exacerbated another crisis, the opioid epidemic. In San Francisco, deaths among homeless people doubled in 2020, 82% of them overdoses. And now, how are cities responding? In response to a growing public outcry, many cities have returned to sweeping up camps of homeless people. The National Coalition for the Homeless reports that at least 65 communities now criminalize or systematically remove homeless camps. New York Mayor Eric Adams recently vowed to remove the approximately 1,000 people who are essentially living in the subway, and police cleared more than 300 outdoor camps within a month. But many who choose to live rough refuse to bunk up with hundreds of others in barracks-like shelters, where theft, lice infestation, and confrontations are commonplace. Some now also cite the fear of catching COVID. Homeless advocates argue that sweeps merely shuffle homeless people around and result in the loss of their belongings. With so many cities short of shelter and psychiatric beds, said Bill Johnson of the National Association of Police Organizations. Jail becomes the default. What else can be done? Some states, such as Alabama, Washington, and Texas, are clarifying their involuntary commitment laws to make it easier to hospitalize people with serious mental illness. Other states, aided by millions in pandemic relief funds, have adopted a housing first approach, which prioritizes putting people under a roof before addressing issues such as mental illness and addiction. Dozens of tiny house communities, some based on Portland, Oregon's Dignity Village, provide transitional housing with more individual privacy than traditional shelters. Since 2007, the U.S. has added more than 373,000 units of permanent supportive housing, which a study in the medical journal The Lancet shows was 90% effective at preventing future homelessness. You heal better when you have a door that you can lock, said Gail Gilman of the San Francisco-based nonprofit All Home. But it takes an investment of millions by local governments to provide free housing for thousands of struggling people, and many advocates argue that any long-term solution must include market incentives for building more affordable and low-cost housing. Getting people off the street takes consistent, intensive effort. Said San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. This crisis did not emerge overnight, and it won't be solved overnight. The Golden State's woes. California, which has some of the country's most expensive housing, is estimated to have more than 25% of the nation's homeless population. About 70% of the state's homeless live outdoors rather than in shelters. And in January 2020, a federal survey found that 70% reported being homeless for the first time. The state's homeless services providers helped 91,000 people move into permanent housing in 2020. And last July, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a $12 billion bill to address homelessness. But the state had already spent $13 billion on the problem over the previous 3 years. And a withering auditor's report last February blamed the lack of visible results on tangled, uncoordinated bureaucracy. In Los Angeles County, the nonprofit Economic Roundtable expects the number of homeless to rise from 66,000 in early 2020 to nearly 90,000 next year. And neighborhoods such as Venice Beach are crowded with tent encampments. We have failed in so many respects, said advocate Theo Henderson, an Angeleno who once lived on the streets. There are families with children living in automobiles. There are elderly and the infirm on the streets. It's a dark time right now. It's all talk. Government creates the problem, then the government fixes it. Yeah, that's a common pattern that you see throughout fairly recent history. I wish there were more solutions, boyos. It's one of those things where once these problems exist, once you got a lot of people living off the government, once you got a lot of homelessness, once you got a drug epidemic, it would have been better to have never let those things happen. But they've happened, and what do we do now? I don't know. Maybe everything just falls apart. Well, my friends, that concludes the news segment for today. So, our Christian topic for today, no comments here. We're going to hear a couple of perspectives, a couple opposing perspectives. People didn't seem too crazy about this guy. We're going to go ahead and give him another shot. Maybe we'll pull up another perspective. But we have somebody arguing in favor of faith alone, and then we have somebody arguing against salvation by faith alone. So let's go ahead and get started with Wretched 11 minutes on James Teaches Faith Alone.
This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
Can any good thing come out of Great Britain? Yep, this is Wretched Radio. Got some good British stuff. We've been hearing some kind of not so good things going on in Great Britain when it comes to morality, values, worldview, no longer being informed by the Bible. Instead, it's mostly secular. This has, of course, been going on for decades. It's good to check in on an occasion, not so that we can tisk, not so that we can simply try to figure out a way to get those Brits to be behaving more morally. Well, that's nice. What does it profit an entire island if they have tea properly, but die and lose their very soul? Doesn't matter. That is why individuals can be involved in political issues, no problem. But let's remember the message of the Christian, the message of the church. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Martin Lloyd-Jones, a great British preacher of yesteryear, 20th century. Some pithy gems from Grace Gems. If you don't get Grace Gems, I encourage you to do so. It's absolutely free, gracegems.org. Every day they'll send you beauties from do they send anything that's from a live person? I don't think so. I think in order to qualify for being quoted in Grace Gems, you have to be dead. I just noticed, and it made me sad. I saw some Grace Gems from Adrian Rogers. Kind of made me sad. Like it'll be like seeing Grace Gems from R.C. Sproul. Great to have those gems, but kind of sad those guys are gone, isn't it? Kind of sad. Those substantial heavy hitters as they leave.
Yeah, I'm starting to think this guy's not a very good source. The clips are not what they say they are, ever.
Things like social media and...
Okay, somebody else is going to take the Protestant side. This guy just beats around the bush way too much. Salvation by faith alone. Here we go. Can we get a little 10 minutes from somebody? Are we justified by faith alone? Are we saved? Faith plus works? All right, let's give this guy a shot. This is a Calvinist dude.
Staying on the topic of faith and works put together,
yes, sir.
Is it wrong for a Protestant church to have a creed that says something to the effect, we are saved by faith evidenced by works, or Abraham was saved by faith demonstrated by works?
Yeah, no, that's, I would say that the biblical view is that we are saved through faith alone. That's the instrument that joins us to Jesus, right? But saving faith is never alone. It always has works. If it is truly saving faith, it will produce works because it's a divine faith given by God that's real. So, as a matter of fact, and this is really important, we need to know our Bibles, brothers and sisters. Paul says, and I want you to please, this is important because you're going to get this. If you minister to your Mormon friends and neighbors, they will bring this up to you. And it goes right along with what you're saying. If you read Romans chapters 3 and 4, follow me here, please. None righteous, not even one. The law can't justify you. It'll justify nobody before God's sight, nobody. Christ is our propitiation. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, Romans 4. God credits to us righteousness apart from works of law. That's what he says, right? But then he asks the question in Romans 4. When was Abraham justified by faith? Was it before circumcision or after circumcision? And what's the answer? Before. And, watch, to add to that, was his faith and justification before the law or after the law? Before. So he was justified by faith before circumcision, before Isaac on the altar, and before the law given by Moses. That's Paul's whole argument. His entire summary of justification is ultimately Abraham. His faith before circumcision, before Isaac, before the law. Now, when you open your Bibles to James chapter 2, it says first in James 2:10, whosoever shall keep the whole law and stumble in one point, he's guilty of all of it, right? But then he goes on to say, Abraham, was he not justified by works? And you go, wait, are Paul and James fighting? Right? And then you recognize, if you read James 2, that they're not even in the same discussion. Here's why. In Romans chapter 4, listen to the timeline. In Romans chapter 4, Paul argues about our justification this way. Abraham, when was he justified? Through faith, before circumcision, before Isaac, before the law. That's when he was justified, through faith, apart from any work of law. Before circumcision, nothing. Before God, he was counted righteous. That's his entire argument of justification. In Abraham, he's the central figure, right? When did it take place, Paul says? Through faith, before circumcision, before Isaac, before the law. You got to capture that. Now, you run on over to James. And James is wisdom literature. It's how do you live. He talks about someone's tongue and how it's like this ship, this rudder, right? And he talks about the mouth and what we speak and how it destroys and it blesses. And then in James chapter 2, he asks the question. Actually, let's go to it. I want you. Let's make sure you're in the text. James chapter 2. He says in verse 14, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works?" It's in verse 14. So I'm sorry. "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works?" What's the point there? It's the profession. Someone says he has faith, but he does not have works. He says, can that faith save him? And what does every Christian say to that? No. No. We're talking about kinds of faith here. Notice this. Paul's discussion in Romans 4 is about how a person is justified before God. James' discussion is about what kind of faith saves. And he says, can a faith that is a mere profession, but not a real possession, save? And his answer is, of course not. And he goes on. He says, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So think about, watch, this is his story, watch, this is beautiful. He says, if someone comes to your door and they're in need of clothing and food, and you say, be warm and well fed, and you slam the door in their face, he says, what is that? What is that? What's it mean if you slam the door in someone's face when you say, be warm and well fed? Watch, what's it mean? You're lying. You didn't mean it. Why? Because you didn't provide anything. You didn't mean be warm. He says, watch, profession is one thing, but if there's not something following it, you don't know that it's real. So, he says, so also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Watch. The question here is not whether we are saved through faith alone or through faith plus works. It's not even the discussion. It's the question of whether dead faith saves or living faith saves. He says, if faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? And you stop and you go, whoa. Paul uses the word justification through faith apart from works of law. And here, James is saying, wasn't Abraham justified by works when he offered up his son on the altar? And you go, are they contradicting each other? Answer, absolutely not. Not even the same conversation. Proof, in Paul, Abraham believed God, it was credited to him as righteousness. Help me now. When? Before what? Circumcision? Before what else? Isaac? Before what else? The law. How many years before Isaac? About 20. But in James's discussion, he says about Abraham, wasn't he justified by his works when he offered up Isaac on the altar? Listen, they're not even at the same point of Abraham's life in the discussion. Did you get it? They're in two different time periods of Abraham's life. James is talking about Abraham's faith vindicating him. The word justified in the Greek can be used about 7 different ways. It can be used to describe being declared righteous before God through faith. It can also be used to describe vindication. Can I give you an example? Jesus, when he was accused of being a drunkard, when that happened to him, he said, "Wisdom is justified by her children." Is Jesus teaching that wisdom is declared righteous by God by her children? No, wisdom is justified by her children. You know what that means? He says, if you want to know what godly wisdom is, look what it produces. It'll vindicate what you're saying, what you're doing. And so James is using it exactly the same way. He says this, you want to know how you know Abraham's faith was true faith, living faith? He offered up Isaac on the altar. That's how you know his faith was living and not dead. And so to answer your question in this big way I just did, is if a church doesn't have a statement, a belief that says that true faith is always accompanied by works, then that faith doesn't understand the gospel. That church doesn't understand the gospel. All the confessions of the Christian church from beginning until now all agree that something fundamentally changes within us when we're saved. You go from death to life. Your heart's changed from stone to flesh. You're indwelt by the Spirit of God. If there are no good works, there is no faith. Watch. There's a big difference, right? It's not saying faith saves you in any way. It's saying that if there is no works, there was no real faith to begin with. So what's it mean? What's it mean? If you're like, well, I don't know. I'd say repent and believe the gospel. Make sure that your faith is real. Contemplate your sin and the holiness of God and turn from your sin to Christ and cast yourself only on him to believe in him. And if you are in Christ and alive from the dead, good works follow. Ephesians 2, Christians love to quote Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. By grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not according to works, lest any man should boast. And then Christians go, stop. But it's not done, is it? Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has already prepared beforehand that we would walk in them. So I would say that one of the things we need to talk about more today in the Christian church, it needs to be heard often, is what you're talking about and what George Whitefield preached all the time. Do you know what started the Great Awakening? George Whitefield's preaching, right? George Whitefield's preaching of the gospel, England to America. The Great Awakening transformed the world, right? Do you know what he preached? He preached the message of repentance and faith and salvation only in Christ through faith alone, and the absolute necessity of the new birth. And he taught that if you don't have a new life, you don't have any faith. Is that saying that Christians are going to be sinless and perfect? It means you're going to be at war with your sin until Jesus brings you home. For sure.
All right. Yeah, man. Salvation by faith, and then you show good works. Once you're saved, salvation produces good works. Rightio, my friends. Well, let's see what this friar has to say. Uh-oh. A friar enters.
You know, the doctrine of justification by faith alone, as taught by Martin Luther and refined by Philip Melanchthon and adopted by all the subsequent reformers, is considered by most that I've read, you're more knowledgeable than I, so correct me if I'm wrong, you know, the linchpin theology of the Reformation. St. John Chrysostom, the most influential commentator of the Pauline epistles in the patristic era, wrote extensively about justification long before Luther and Melanchthon, and you have a PhD and work on St. John Chrysostom. So could you briefly describe what justification by faith alone means, and how does patristic teaching on justification differ from that of the Reformers and Protestants? This could be a show of its own.
It should be.
But nonetheless.
Sola fide is one of the great Reformation slogans. And in fact, this dogma of the Protestant faith, articulated by Martin Luther from his own experience, really from his own inner angst, has become the hallmark. Although I should say at the outset that there is controversy amongst the Protestants themselves about exactly what this is, very much like there were different opinions of what sola scriptura is. So for instance, Martin Luther had a concept, what he called the glorious exchange, which lies behind his concept of justification by faith alone, that made his colleague and his great friend, Philip Melanchthon, very nervous. So nervous, in fact, that Melanchthon refused to put the word alone in the Augsburg Confession. In its paragraph about justification by faith, Luther wanted the word alone in there. Luther had imposed the word into his German translation of the Bible, which did not exist, which was just the original spring from a fountain of mistranslations that continue to this day in the Protestant movement. And we could even go back beyond Martin Luther. We could go back to John Wycliffe, for instance, and then later into William Tyndale, who made very conscientious mistranslations of the New Testament in order to further Protestant ideology. And this is going on today, for instance, with the New International Version, which is a very much not a translation, very much an interpretation in order to promote evangelicalism. If listeners want to know more about that, there are footnotes in my book documenting this reality. So even between Luther and his close friend Melanchthon, there was tension about justification by faith alone. Melanchthon did not want the word alone in there, and that is something that the Orthodox support because the word alone does not exist in the New Testament. It exists only as the consequence of Martin Luther's specific concept of justification. I would also say that Luther was so uncomfortable with any other concepts of justification that he wanted to remove the Epistle of James from the New Testament. In fact, he called the Epistle of James an epistle of straw, which scandalized many other of his followers, including Melanchthon, and Melanchthon convinced him to drop this. Let's not revise the canon of the New Testament, please. And of course, the reason he wanted to do that is that St. James is so explicit in chapter 2 that justification is not by faith alone. In fact, that's a quote. Abraham was not justified by faith alone. This is James chapter 2. And he goes further and says that he was justified by his works. So an Orthodox would simply say that if any Christian tradition forms a dogma of justification that makes it so uncomfortable with the actual words of the apostles themselves, so uncomfortable that they want to eradicate them, something is wrong. Something is wrong. We believe in justification by faith, but we do not believe in justification by faith alone. We believe in justification of faith working, in St. Paul's language, through love, which is the emphasis of St. James. St. James says justification by faith alone is a mental game, that even Satan has possession of this mental proposition. Satan knows that God is one, but that is not a faith that he leans on. He isn't a person trusting in God and letting fruits come from that union. In fact, it's a dogma that Satan hates.
Father, in Protestantism, there appears to be somewhat, based on what we've been discussing, a gulf between faith and works. Specifically, though, as it relates to salvation itself. But Protestants, as we know, do good works all over the world, have done great works all over the world for many, many years.
Thank God.
And they also acknowledge sanctification, which seems to include good works. How does the Protestant teaching of sanctification differ from the Orthodox understanding of salvation as theosis?
Tremendous question. Let me respond to your initial affirmation. First, by acknowledging that I agree with you, that there are many, many beautiful charities and acts of Christian compassion that are Protestant born and led. It's absolutely true. However, the Protestant teaching, one of the fruits of their new soteriology, their 16th century and following soteriology, is to put an emphasis upon salvation in the past. You know, the word save in the New Testament is sozo. This is the most common word. And it's used by the writers of the New Testament in all three tenses. It's used in the past tense, it's used in the present tense, it's used in the future tense. If you asked a Protestant which of those three tenses they thought should be the emphasis, or what is in fact the emphasis of the New Testament, they would invariably say the past. Their focus is to make sure that people are saved. And when they meet an Orthodox or they meet a Catholic, I can't tell you how many times, even as a priest, I have met a Protestant or an evangelical, and they have inquired, sometimes discreetly, sometimes not, if I am saved. This is their emphasis. In fact, that emphasis on salvation as a past act, as a born-again experience, as a time when a person asks Jesus into their life, that emphasis upon salvation in the past is not the emphasis of the New Testament. If you had 3 columns and you lifted all the references of past, present, and future, you would see the New Testament emphasis, believe it or not, is on the future. Salvation is primarily a future reality. For an Orthodox, it has a past reality. It is given as a gift, as a free gift in response to faith and repentance in the sacrament of baptism, where a person is born again. Then it is worked out, as St. Paul says, we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. Forgive me, but there is no trembling in the Protestant concept of salvation. We work out our salvation with fear and trembling presently, and we look forward to the day when our Lord Jesus Christ will come back in glory and definitively and finally deliver us from our enemies and bring us into his eternal kingdom. That is our future salvation. And for an Orthodox, we're not saved until you're saved. So we could say, yes, I'm saved, and if we mean I've been taken out of the kingdom of darkness and united to Christ in baptism, or I am working out my salvation in a life of faith now. But for us, mostly, we have our emphasis, like the New Testament, upon the future, and we're looking to be saved in the future. Mm-hmm. That concept unfortunately, undercuts the motivation in Protestantism for sanctification. So even though sanctification is formally in the systematic theologies of Protestantism, it is not the emphasis of the Protestant church, which is why the spiritual disciplines are almost non-existent in the Protestant tradition. It's why they don't have a philokalia. It's why they don't have a tradition of saints like we do. And sadly, it also means that their expectations for what can be done in the Christian life and for the transformation that can take place in a person's life are low. Mm. And when they read or when they touch an Orthodox saint, when someone would read the life of St. John of San Francisco, who lived in our times, or St. Nectarios, these are 20th century saints, they would just be left dumbfounded and either deeply motivated to find out how this could happen or convinced that this was all a fraud. Because it's not in the Protestant experience. I remember as a Protestant, when I became Orthodox, the greatest shock was to move from a tradition that focused upon dogmatic teachings and ideas to moving into the Orthodox tradition, which focuses on spiritual life. And to see that the majority of our books were not written, we don't even have systematic theologies. The majority of our books are written about sanctity and about how to live the Christian life. Yes. That was a tremendous shock. Prayer is the emphasis in the Orthodox tradition and was most definitely not the emphasis in Calvinism.
A lot to think about there, boyos. You know, my thoughts are that people probably should try to go to some sort of a church. And I was trying, and I just feel like circumstances in my life and in the world and the way things have played out, they've pushed me inward. There's a lot of men out there seeking Christ who, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable going to church. It's something that I just continually pray to God and ask for clarity on. I do see myself trying to see what's up with some other churches, but I remain in contemplation. I believe that salvation is through faith in Jesus Christ. He died for us. He threw us a rope. You merely need to grab onto it by believing in him and accepting him into your heart as your Lord and Savior. As far as community, as far as fellowship goes, traditionally, that is where people find fellowship. That is where you find fellowship with your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, is at church. And it makes me sad to think how many men feel so just isolated from these traditional things. And lately I've been saying that my faith is starting to go back to traditional Catholicism, but a lot of it is just wishing that the church never became so fractured. If Christians all could have just gone to the same church throughout history, I believe it wouldn't have given secular atheism and scientism such a strong foothold. I just feel kind of sleepy today, guys. I just feel kind of tired. The cigarettes are hitting me weird. I'm trying to hurry up and get through this pack and get back to the working out, get back to the good habits. Let's have a good week this week, boyos. Thanks for hanging out with me today. That is all. Tomorrow, supposed to be the Grillcast. I might rebrand the Grillcast to something else. Comfy Cast 1. I'm still thinking about formats for the Cozy Cast or what have you. Might go to a topic format where we watch some clips and maybe just try to watch some goofy stuff or some lighthearted stuff. Trying to keep that structure going in everything I do, boyos. But I appreciate y'all being here with me. It's been real. And I'll see you next time.